This young man with a handsome face, currently battered and bruised, is Aster, the adopted son of the head of the Elmheim family. They are the strongest military bloodline on the continent, a family that has dedicated their swords to protecting the imperial royalty for generations. The head of the clan is named Roderick A. Elmheim, and he is the only person in the entire kingdom who possesses 7 wings. During one particular deployment, after he had completely dominated and cleared the battlefield in a bloodbath, he came across his critically injured son standing behind him. Roderick put on a hypocritical front and asked how he was doing. However, Aster exposed his cruel father's plot, revealing that he had used Aster's unit as mere bait for the battle from the very beginning. After they had served their purpose, he discarded them without a shred of mercy. Upon hearing this, Roderick coldly humiliated him, claiming that being bait was the only value a wingless failure like him could offer. Many years ago, Roderick had first met him when he was just a child, clinging to life in the middle of a blizzard. He took him in and raised him, and because of that, Aster did everything in his power to repay the debt of saving his life. But because he wasn't a blood relative, he lacked the wings necessary to truly repay his father's supposed kindness. He was constantly mocked by his peers, told that a wingless loser who didn't even have a crest shouldn't dream so big. What they were talking about were wing marks. The more marks a person possesses, the greater their latent magical power. Aster was the only person in the Duke's mansion who couldn't use magic, and his siblings constantly labeled him as the wingless one. Yet, he never lost heart, risking his life to train with the sword every single day. He believed that one day, his loyalty would finally be rewarded. In the end, all he received was an ambush by soldiers and his father's cold words. "What right does a mediocre tool like you have to demand expectations? You're an eyesore, get out of my sight immediately." Aster finally realized just how foolish he had been. He gripped his sword tightly and charged straight at the man. Unfortunately, Aster was intercepted by his 2 brothers and bound tightly with glowing red chains. He crawled humiliated under the insults of his father and brothers, asking in despair why he was even saved in the first place if the plan was always to throw him away. It was only from that question that Aster learned a shocking secret. It turned out that from the very beginning, the power of 7 wings had existed within his body. After revealing the truth, the cold-blooded Roderick simply turned on his heel and walked away. He left the weakened Aster lying in the snow to be finished off by his 2 brothers. In that moment, standing at death's door, he suddenly felt something strange. He could vaguely feel his body being wrapped in a strange warmth. Aster slowly opened his eyes to find himself in the body of a newborn infant. He was lying in the arms of a woman. Suddenly, he heard the shouts of soldiers conducting a search. They were ordered to find that woman at any cost and bring the infant back to Lord Roderick. Hearing the name Roderick, he remembered days that he had also been picked up on a snowy night once before. He realized he had returned to the very day Roderick found him in the blizzard. Aster then struggled with all his might to break free from the woman's arms. He told himself he had to save his own life to survive and must not let himself fall into the hands of the Duke's family. Although his limbs felt like they were burning hot, he continued to crawl through the thick blanket of snow. After crawling for a while, Aster collapsed from exhaustion at the feet of a young noble girl. The girl turned around and called out to her father, Viscount Heifrey. He quickly scooped the boy up and said worriedly, "Why is there a child in a place like this?" Then, as he turned to see the tracks left in the snow, he was stunned to realize the boy had traveled such a long distance. He became incredibly curious about the boy's origins. A hazy vision and a faint voice suddenly appeared. "Where is this?" An image of Alphen as a child gradually became clear. "This child has come to meet me." Right then, Aster snapped awake. The lingering echo of that dream made him whisper, "An angel." Alphen, who was peeking in, shouted excitedly, "Sister, look." The baby opened his eyes. Fran, standing nearby, frowned and warned her, "Hey, don't poke him, you're gonna pull his cute little nose right off." Immediately after, Aster began to struggle violently, causing the children around him to panic, wondering what on earth was happening. Aster didn't stop there. He rubbed his face against Martha's sleeve, making her scream, "No, don't do that." After struggling for a bit, Aster lunged right out of the arms of the people surrounding him. He crawled forward desperately as if trying to grab hold of something in front of him. Seeing this, Fran panicked, "Damn it, what is going on with this kid?" The young girl picked up Alphen and chased after him, yelling, "Stay right there." Seeing the chaos behind him, Aster was confused as to why they were chasing him. Soon, he gritted his teeth as if focusing all his mana to lunge forward. His pupils began to glow with a strange light. Suddenly, Aster's small body was lifted by a mysterious energy. "I'm flying, is this mana?" Aster then tried to flip his body over to change the situation in time. However, that mysterious power vanished, causing his body to plummet. I can't control it. I'm falling. Instinctively, Aster squeezed his eyes shut, too afraid to face what was coming. Just then, a man appeared and caught him. Now you're falling from the sky. You really are a strange child. Aster's eyes widened as he looked up and realized this man was Viscount Highfried, the older brother of Duke Roderick. The moment he recognized him, Aster's inner voice cried out, "No way, don't tell me this is the other branch of the Elmheim family." A fragment of his memory surfaced. Highfried A. Elmheim, the head of the Viscount house and a side branch of the Elmheim clan. He had once fought side by side with his younger brother Roderick and was one of the two pillars trusted with the duty of protecting the imperial family. But the Viscount Highfried he knew had died in the civil war along with the destruction of his entire house. Now he was certain, after piecing everything together, Aster realized with a shock that he truly had returned to the past. Aster sighed helplessly. He had tried so hard to escape the Duke's family, only to be picked up by the Duke's own brother. Later, Aster lay snugly in the arms of a woman who looked at him with concern. The child's mana went wild and he flew into the air. It seems so. I knew he wasn't an ordinary baby. Then, the corners of her lips curled into a friendly smile. The woman hugged Aster tightly and comforted him. You must have been so scared, but you're safe now. Hearing those words, he could only stare in wide-eyed wonder, not understanding what was happening. Highfried, standing nearby, also looked on and smiled. He gently reached out to touch Aster and whispered, "This child carries an unimaginable power within him." Highfried lifted the boy's shirt to reveal a pattern on his back and noted, "This mark is the proof." When the woman saw the mark, she winced in shock. This is the 7 wings. Aster himself was shocked to see the mark, wondering why such a thing would appear on his body. As soon as he finished that thought, his pupils constricted as if he had remembered something. He recalled Roderick's words from his previous life. What we need is the power of the 7 wings inside you. Upon realizing this, he was momentarily stunned. So that's how it is. Aster happened to remember the scene that had taken place on that snowy night. To achieve his goal, Roderick had snatched Aster up and taken him away. Thinking back on it all, Aster clenched his fist in rage. He only saved me to steal the 7 wings. Wingless, my foot, he tore the wings off someone else himself, and yet he dared to say those things. The woman suddenly hugged him tight and asked worriedly, "In that case?" She looked at Highfried's expression and asked cautiously, "How should we handle this child?" A bad feeling suddenly welled up in Aster's head. His tiny hands clenched tightly. He couldn't let this power fall into the hands of the Elmheim family. He needed this power to get his revenge on that man. Highfried thought for a moment and then decided, "I will adopt this child." Hearing this, the tension in Aster vanished, replaced by a look of utter astonishment. Highfried gently reached his hands out toward Aster. He softly patted the boy's head and remarked, "Right now, this child is just a fledgling that can't fly on its own yet. Until the day he chooses to take flight of his own accord, I will take responsibility for raising him." Hearing that, Aster's eyes went wide with disbelief. Just then, Martha and friends suddenly tumbled to the ground. Seeing the children appear one by one, Highfried asked seriously, "Did you kids hear all of that?" Martha sat up and whispered softly, "We were just worried about the baby." Highfried could only sigh at the sight. Fren ran excitedly to the woman, "Mom." The young girl looked at Aster with an eager face. "What is his name?" She smiled and thought for a moment, "Let's see." She then lifted him up and named him Aster, a name for a new star just born into their family. Time flew by, and 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. As soon as they set foot at the school, a man bowed respectfully and said, "We have been expecting you, Viscount Highfried." At that moment, Aster's mysterious figure appeared from the carriage. As he stepped down from the carriage, he walked with an air of complete confidence. Aster even carefully and politely helped Alphen down. "Sister Alphen, please watch your step." She smiled back and replied, "Thank you, Aster." Aster smiled as he watched Alphen's playful behavior. Then, he gripped his sword and followed behind Alphen. The Sword Dance Festival, a high society event held annually by a prestigious ducal house under the Elmheim banner, was for the martial nobility, on the surface, a place for families to strengthen ties, but also a stage for each house to show off their promising young swordsmen. Soon, they both stepped up behind Highfried, the ones carrying the glory of their lineage. And so, Highfried led the way with Aster and Alphen following majestically. Around them, the students of the school whispered and gossiped, "Look, the Viscount's house is here. Are they here to be a laughingstock again? I heard they couldn't produce an heir, so they adopted some nameless brat from nowhere." How much longer do they plan on dragging the Elmheim name through the mud? Aster continued to walk past calmly, leaving everyone stunned. So, that's the guy. Noticing that he seemed to be paying attention, Alphen tried to reassure him, don't let it get to you. She clenched her fist and reminded him, in this place, if you show even a hint of weakness, you'll be crushed instantly. Aster walked on with an expressionless face, right beside Alphen, whose arm was trembling with anger. Heifried also spoke in a low, cautionary tone, this is the current standing of our Viscount house. After a brief pause, he turned back to look at the boy with eyes full of trust. I want you to see it for yourself. He looked at Aster's ice-cold expression and asked, are you disappointed? The corners of the boy's mouth curled into a smile, and he replied firmly, not at all, father. This kind of coldness actually suits me quite well. Seeing that attitude, Heifried let out a proud laugh. Good, then. In his past life, as the disgrace of the Elmheim family, he had made the worst possible debut into high society. It was a place full of bitter memories, but Aster gripped his sword tightly with a determined thought, but now that the 7 wings have returned, I am different. Aster's eyes narrowed, sharp and cold as a blade, staring intently at his target. Suddenly, Heifried, Alphen, and Aster all looked up toward a classroom window. Through the glass, Dallas and Gryan appeared with unfriendly expressions. Aster watched in silence, his hand unconsciously tightening its grip. He followed after Heifried and noted triumphantly, well then, let's begin a brilliant debut into high society. The swordsmanship competition, the central event of the entire city, broke out as a testament to an era ruled by knights. On the arena floor, a swordsman gripped his blade with a look of absolute determination. His opponent was no slouch either, charging forward with gritted teeth. Clearly, a knight had to possess both strength and charisma. The two of them charged into a head-on collision amidst the cheers of the crowd. Strength is swordsmanship. Quickly, the stronger swordsman knocked his opponent back. Charisma is fame. He charged forward coldly. The two lunged at each other again, using their momentum, but there was one thing that proved a person could possess both. A mark gradually revealed itself on the swordsman's hand, and his eyes glowed brilliantly. The swordsman swung his blade without hesitation, shattering his opponent's sword into pieces. It left him looking utterly bedraggled. Finally, he raised his sword high before the admiration of everyone present. The ultimate symbol of all was the wing emblem. The winner was also the person whose wing emblem was clearly displayed on their body. Alphen, on the grandstand, covered her ears tightly with a look of annoyance, finding the place suffocatingly loud. She silently recalled the expressions of Fren and Flare from earlier and sighed, noting it was no wonder Flare and Fren hadn't wanted to come. Meanwhile, Aster simply remained pensive, bowing his head. He suddenly remembered the tragic sight of his defeat against Dallas. Alphen looked over at Aster curiously and called his name, Aster. She asked worriedly if he was nervous, since after all, this was his very first sword dance festival. In contrast to his previous state, he now answered confidently, saying, actually, no, while thinking to himself that if anything, it just felt strangely familiar. Alphen looked at Aster, her confusion clear. Heifried stepped forward right at that moment to give instructions. I'm going out for a bit to attend a meeting, please keep an eye on Alphen for me. She heard this and felt a bit dissatisfied. Father, I'm far more talented than Aster. He could only smile and reply, you're quite clumsy, you know. He heard that and placed a hand on Aster's shoulder with eyes full of expectation. There are many children here your age, build relationships whenever you can. Then his expression shifted as he whispered a final warning, and don't let anyone discover the matter of the 7 wings. He watched Heifried's retreating back with some hesitation. Father says that, but he realized that the murderous gazes of everyone present were fixed intently on him. Aster let out a weary sigh. In such an overtly hostile atmosphere, how am I supposed to connect with anyone? Suddenly, he noticed something. Alphen was surprised to see Aster leaving in a hurry. Aster. Where are you going? He didn't look back, simply replying, to make friends. Aster walked straight toward Dallas and his group of friends. Dallas looked on with contempt. Who is this kid? He raised his voice to introduce himself. It's a pleasure to meet you, Cousin Dallas. Aster's face showed increasing satisfaction. I am Aster F. Elmheim, your younger brother. Aster continued to speak, ignoring his cousin's grimace. I saw you from outside and came over to say hello. Gryan, standing nearby, mocked him, is that the adopted son? The one the Viscount picked up. Dallas heard this and let out a laugh filled with disgust. I see. No wonder. How can you brazenly call yourself an F like that? He looked at the two people before him and couldn't help but feel angry. Dallas and Gryan, the two legitimate heirs of the Elmheim family, the two who killed me in my past life. Aster thought silently. They used to look so terrifying, but now, before me is nothing but endless hatred. They are just children wearing the guise of adults. Alphen suddenly appeared, cutting through the atmosphere. Aster. She grabbed Aster's hand and spoke sternly, let's go. We're going back. Consider your greeting finished. Dallas saw her and called out, Alphen, you came too. He teased her enthusiastically. What's this? Not hiding behind father's back today. His words became increasingly impolite. Come here and put on a show for the younger ones. This is an order from the main house, you know that, don't you? Alphen simply threw a furious glare at Dallas and snapped, no thank you. The main house and the branch family aren't in a master-servant relationship. As Aster was pulled away, he hurriedly called out, sister. Before he could finish, he felt her hands trembling. I'm not done talking yet. He thought of this and couldn't help but feel sad. Dallas spoke up again with a haughty shout, do you guys know something? He began to spread gossip. Her father was a knight, but he failed to protect the king, so, to take responsibility, his own biological brother cut off his arm. Alphen froze upon hearing this, but Dallas didn't stop. Thank God I don't carry that failure's blood, she shouted back in a rage, take those words back. Before Alphen could finish, Dallas bluntly spat a mouthful of wine in her face. If you dare insult my father, I won't. He looked at her with disdain. Only able to produce useless daughters, even the title of Baron can't be inherited. Your father must be so disappointed in you. Saying that, he pointed a cunning finger at her. This isn't the next ball. Remember to wear something you don't mind getting soaked in, or just throw on some old rags. Alphen heard this and could only stay silent, clutching her dress in resentment. Aster stood silently. On the way here, I was worried. He looked at each of their faces in turn. I thought perhaps meeting them again would mean I wouldn't feel angry anymore. Thinking this, Aster reached out and took a bottle of wine from their hands. Then he approached Alphen and placed a hand on her shoulder. But thankfully, he didn't hesitate to toss the bottle toward Dallas. Hey, Dallas. He caught the bottle warily. Aster immediately swung his sword, slicing the wine bottle in two. You're still the same piece of trash you always were. Wine splashed all over Dallas, leaving him in shock. What? Gryan, standing nearby, looked worried. Brother, while he simply licked a drop of wine from his blade and said, what? It's just grape juice. Then he mimicked Dallas's earlier look of loathing and said, it suits a parasitic noble like you perfectly. Flashing back 3 years ago, a terrified scream rang out. Stop it. Aster, Highfried issued a warning, are you trying to kill your sisters? Stay right there. He gave a stern command, snap out of it. Witnessing the scene, Highfried was momentarily stunned. So this is the Seven Wings. I never imagined it hidden such dangerous power. In his heart, he wondered, can this power really be controlled? He felt deeply confused and doubted himself. Because of me, and you too, Aster. Right at that moment, a subordinate rushed into the room to report, Viscount. There is an emergency. The guests present frowned in annoyance. What is it? We are in the middle of negotiations. The subordinate stammered. He finally managed to report, the heads of the main family and the branch family, their sons are dueling. Highfried grimaced the moment the words were out. What? Roderick, however, showed a deep, unreadable look in his eyes. As soon as he heard the news, he stood up decisively and left. At the same time, Alphen also ran over. Father. He paused slightly. Alphen. She asked what had happened. A duke's voice rang out with excitement, look. Over there. He seemed very satisfied. A fratricidal battle within the Elmheim family isn't a sight you see every day. His gaze carried a hint of judgment. No matter how this match ends, everyone in the room was simultaneously struck by a wave of curiosity. The golden-haired duke's lips curled up. This sword dance festival might turn into a disaster down there. Dallas raised his sword heroically. Daring to provoke the ducal family, you're an idiot. Just a bastard raised on the streets, you don't even understand the difference in power. The crowd around them went wild at the sight. Is that a four-wing emblem? Truly the heir of the ducal family, he's on a completely different level. He couldn't hide his smug expression. Now, show me your wing emblem. He didn't stop his taunts or challenges. Or are you too ashamed to call it out after seeing mine? Aster remained strangely calm. Boasting about such a mediocre pattern, he asked contemptuously, do you really think I can't do something so embarrassing? This remark completely enraged Dallas. Not letting him get angrier, Aster proposed, if I win, you will apologize to my sisters. Understood, cousin. He agreed immediately. Fine. But if I win, you will be my dog. Dallas's eyes were full of self-confidence. I will order you around for the rest of your life. Dallas's attack was quickly blocked by Aster. But because the power was so great, he was pushed back, sending dust flying. Aster's hands gripped his sword even tighter. Dallas spoke arrogantly, this is the power of one who truly possesses it. With that, he charged like a storm. Seeing this, Alphen was incessantly worried. Aster, the sharp-haired count, thought Dallas's swordsmanship was still immature. Looking at the current situation, though, no matter how poor his technique, the overwhelming mana of the wing emblem was enough to compensate for everything. To compare, if one wing mana was like a candle flame, then the mana sealed in four wings was an explosion. As they fought, Dallas's spirit rose even higher. Where did that momentum from earlier go? He was constantly challenging him. Didn't you say you'd make me apologize? Or was that just big talk? He roared, show me your strength. Observing from above, the golden-haired duke was slightly stunned. Is the match over? The tip of Aster's blade flashed past. He had blocked the powerful attack. This left Dallas wide-eyed in surprise. What? He simply replied coldly, you talk too much. With that, Aster used his strength to hurl his cousin into the air. The aura he emitted now was increasingly dominant. Aster thought to himself, for the past 10 years, I've learned to control mana at the Viscount's house, just waiting for this one chance to take my revenge on you all. His eyes flashed with sharpness. His next attack didn't hesitate, aiming straight for Dallas's head, leaving him with no time to react. Pressed down, his legs collapsed onto the cold ground. The onlookers could only stare in amazement. Even though Dallas is being pushed back. Even Dallas himself couldn't understand it. I have four wings. Aster remained silent, not uttering a single word. Dallas's sword looked as if it were about to snap in two. The amount of mana being released was enormous. Only now did the crowd get noisy. Could it be he's really about to win? They discussed it animatedly. Dallas is being completely overwhelmed, he doesn't even have a chance to fight back. Everyone felt goosebumps. Does the Elmheim family really still have such a monster? His actions continued. Heifried's mood became worried. This is not good. Dallas gritted his teeth, enduring with everything he had. He tried to remember what had happened in the past. He stammered out, hey. Stop. A shout rang out from above, no. Aster, an enormous source of power radiated out. Everyone present was treated to a spectacular sight. Dallas's sword actually broke in half. When it was over, he sent a message, next time, you should wear rags. Aster emphasized every word, something you don't mind getting soaked in, cousin. He realized he was no longer Aster the Wingless. Alphen looked at him and smiled with satisfaction. As of now, just realizing that, my head is clear enough. Out of nowhere, Aster's pupils suddenly contracted. An oppressive power was gradually approaching. He was startled. The real enemy is only appearing now. That person was Roderick. The hall was now filled with non-stop gossip. Unbelievable. The youngest son of a Viscount family actually defeated the third son of the main house's head. Amidst the buzzing remarks, a pair of legs walked slowly. But this has really gotten out of hand. There's no way that person will stay silent after having his honor defiled like this. It was none other than Aster, with a grave face, the eighth head of the main Elmheim family. At this, Dallas chuckled as he watched. It only showed Aster approaching Roderick step by step. He furrowed his brows, his face turning sharp and cold. Faced with such an overwhelming presence, the boy showed no fear. Duke Roderick A. Elmheim. Immediately after, Dallas scrambled to his feet. He knelt abjectly before Roderick. Father. Dallas began to tattle, his finger pointing repeatedly at Aster. It's him. This is the brat who dared to oppose the main branch, even though he's nothing but filthy mixed blood. However, those words only made Roderick angrier. Please, "Father, use your power to show him his place." Roderick did not answer, he coldly struck out at him. Dallas stared at his own hand in sheer terror. Roderick's ruthless action caused the entire hall to fall into a dead silence. Even Brian became completely shell-shocked. Roderick withdrew his hand, his eyes cold and full of authority. How can a loser smile so shamelessly? You have tarnished the honor of my family. A person who cannot even avenge himself. Highfried saw this and shouted in a panic, "No. Stop, Roderick." He didn't even care, swinging his arm high, "is not worthy of holding a sword." The entire audience chamber suddenly fell silent. Dallas couldn't stop shaking with fear. Roderick glanced over with a cold stare. He was genuinely surprised by Aster's action. "What do you think you're doing?" He kept his cool and explained calmly, "My cousin still hasn't apologized to her." With a steadfast gaze, Aster spoke up directly, "Please save the punishment for after that's settled, uncle." At those words, Roderick's expression grew even darker. "I heard you were just some orphan Highfried picked up, yet now you really think you're one of the Elmheims." He replied slowly, his voice perfectly composed, "I am his son first. Despite not being of the same blood, I believe I have learned enough from my father about a knight's self-respect and the family's honor." Hearing the answer, he flicked his eyes upward, and Roderick immediately became even more explosive. "Then, as a member of the Viscount's house, you have brought unnecessary dishonor to the family head, the pinnacle of 12,000 knights, the king's own blade, and that very pride itself." Those present listened intently to his words. "Surely you understand that this can no longer be dismissed as mere childish bickering." Even he couldn't help but be stunned by Roderick's words. "You should be the one who understands that better than anyone." From high above, he watched the two of them closely. Roderick continued to drop his words. "Your father lost an arm to atone for his disloyalty." The blade was now just inches from Aster's collar. "So, what will you offer up?" He suddenly replied with total respect as his uncle spoke up. His voice was steely and unyielding. "This isn't a squabble between brothers but a valid duel. I only used my sword to answer the insults thrown at my family." Roderick's frown deepened, his sharp gaze never wavering. Aster showed no fear and countered frankly, "One who cannot avenge themselves is unworthy of holding a sword." "You said that, didn't you, uncle? I have no intention of losing even a single finger." High above, Alfin trembled at his bold declaration. He raised an eyebrow, his eyes filled with intrigue. "Is that boy really only 10? You've got to be kidding me." Even so, Roderick maintained his unchanging, stern demeanor. A moment later, he finally relented, turning away slightly. "I see." However, Roderick suddenly spun back around. "Then, take your stance." Aster immediately got into position, ready to react. The blade swept past, dangerously close to him. He didn't hold back at all. The force of the strike sent Aster flying. Witnessing the scene, Alfin gasped in shock, covering her mouth. Highfried panicked and immediately shouted, "Roderick." In a rage, he instantly swung his sword toward Roderick's back. He calmly and quickly blocked the strike. Highfried landed safely back on the ground. He rushed toward the boy in a panic. "Aster. Are you okay? Aster." But all that was left there was a broken sword. Highfried couldn't believe his eyes in that moment. Surprisingly, Aster was still standing firm right there. Though covered in injuries, his eyes remained determined. Roderick glanced coldly at such stubbornness. Without saying a word, he turned his back and walked away. Roderick's face was dark, his hands clenched tight. The moment he left, Aster lost his balance and stumbled to the ground. Highfried caught him worriedly. "Aster." Aster spoke with difficulty. "I kept my word, father. My promise and everything else." He frowned at his reckless son. "You did very well." Roderick walked slowly, step by step, up the stairs. He stood there waiting and couldn't help but tease him. "That was rather childish, Roderick." Without a hint of fear, he analyzed calmly, "But if you let the boy talk that much, the head of the main branch would lose all face. So, ending it there was quite reasonable, wasn't it?" Even he couldn't stop praising Aster. To face Duke Roderick head-on and still stand firm and survive, that boy truly is a genius. He rubbed his chin happily at the boy's performance. That was the most perfect high society debut. The man beside him finally spoke up. "Even so, I was scared out of my wits. I thought Elmheim was going to be torn in two right then and there." Roderick looked at them both with bloodshot eyes. "A turbulent era is coming." He slowly pronounced a sentence. "A storm so violent it could tear this world into 2 or 3 pieces." The next morning, the sky was clear blue with scattered, fluffy white clouds. In the foreground, a man stood with his mouth agape in pure shock. Seeing a small boy like Aster able to take down veteran soldiers, he was utterly amazed, a small smile tugging at his lips. That's truly incredible. He shouted with joy, "Young Master Aster." The soldiers standing behind them watched in awe. Those skills are unbelievable. To reach this level at only 10 years old, it's terrifying. He replied enthusiastically, ever since the sword dance festival, his training intensity has been even more brutal than before. That must be a massive motivation. With a face full of confidence, he continued, besides, have you all heard? The young master took down Duke Roderick's third son. They were extremely satisfied, since those from the main branch had looked down on them for years. This news was truly gratifying. Meanwhile, from his mind to his eyes, Aster showed a clear thirst for victory. At the sword dance festival, I showed enough of my strength and spirit. Every fierce sword strike he swung seemed to voice his feelings. At least it was enough to silence the mockery that the Viscount's house is the disgrace of Elmheim. But the real obstacle is still the head of Elmheim. Honestly, I want to know where my true limits are. I want to test myself on that stage even more, but his face became set with determination. His eyebrows furrowed slightly, showing clear confidence. At my current level, I can't beat Roderick. Amidst the violent swirling wind, Aster suddenly had a moment of clarity. In the end, wing marks are just a measure of the latent magical potential within the body. Innate talent is just a wasted treasure if you can't control it. Yet, I still can't release the power of the 7 wings. He swung his weapon forcefully. If only I didn't have to worry about losing control. If only I could test the power of the 7 wings to its absolute limit. One decisive sweep tore up the ground, blowing his opponents away. Aster's gaze darkened, cold and certain. The sword finally descended. His voice rang out defiantly, "Who's next?" In the blink of an eye, Aster had defeated all the soldiers facing him. From behind, a bright female voice rang out, "You're fighting quite aggressively today." Alphen tilted her head with a slight smirk, her words sounding like a playful scolding. "You really don't know the meaning of moderation, do you? Aster, father is calling for you." Amidst the fallen bodies, he walked away quietly. "Father?" "Yes, I'm coming right now." As he walked past her, Aster paused, his eyes showing a hint of surprise. "That outfit." Alphen turned slightly, her face calm but her eyes full of scrutiny. Aster didn't hesitate to follow up, "It's rare to see you wearing it. Didn't you say you hated it because it wasn't cute?" Alphen sighed softly, her voice steady. "Everything needs balance, right? Looking at you, I realized I can't just stand still forever." She then pointed a wooden sword at him as a warning. "So," she cleared her throat, half joking and half serious, "when you get back, you're going to have to spend a lot of time with me." Hearing that, Aster couldn't help but laugh out loud. He raised both hands in the air as if surrendering. "Please go easy on me, then." Aster stood before the room and knocked softly on the door. He then pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Excuse me." Highfried tilted his head with a cold expression. "I called for you." "Sit down." Aster sat down cautiously. Faced with the heavy atmosphere in the room, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes showing a hint of exhaustion. "It's been 10 years since the day you joined our family." Suddenly, Highfried brought out a precious treasure before Aster's shocked eyes. "Actually, I intended to wait until you were a bit older." But he looked at it, his mind in a whirl. "This is." He frowned with a serious gaze, "proof of the family successor." "Aster," Highfried requested calmly, "I want you to succeed the Viscount's house." At his somewhat unexpected proposal, Aster's entire body froze. "As you know, the position of the Viscount's house is very sensitive." Highfried explained softly, "But even with our flaws, we are still a side branch bearing the name Elmheim, lords guarding this territory. There are many things we must protect." He looked worried. "I cannot leave the position of the future family head vacant forever." Even so, Aster appeared quite concerned. "Do my sisters agree?" Highfried comforted him gently. "Your sisters are studying at the Knight Academy and will return in 3 days. I plan to speak with them then." He looked worried. "Sister Martha and Sister Kudryavka are coming home." Aster's face darkened. "If that's the case, they won't be happy. Especially Sister Kudryavka, she's going to be absolutely furious." He stated firmly, "She hates me because I was coincidentally born a boy and coincidentally possessed the power of the 7 wings." Aster immediately refused. "I cannot agree to this." His voice carried a sharp, cold edge. "I can't even control my own mana. I'm still the child who once almost killed his own sister." Aster claimed, I don't have the confidence to face my sister's wrath like that. High-Fried didn't rush to speak but smiled faintly. After a long silence, he finally spoke. There are times I truly wonder if you are actually a child. He enthusiastically placed a luxurious wooden box on the table. This ring was meant to be a reward for your performance at the Sword Dance Festival. He carefully observed the box, but perhaps you would like this more. His eyes lit up instinctively, and Aster appeared excited. That is, High-Fried explained in a low voice, what's inside is the demon sword Gram, a blade that consumes mana. This sword can control the power of the 7 wings. High-Fried led him to a forest. Aster asked curiously, Father, if we're just testing the sword, wouldn't the training hall be enough? No, this is just to prepare for the worst-case scenario. He remembered back to when Aster was younger. When you were little, you had a tendency to wreck the house quite often. High-Fried raised the sword with a serious gaze. The demon sword Gram is a legendary treasure, only passed down to the eldest son of the Elmheim family. This sword was originally entrusted to the main house, but I personally brought it here just for you. A flash of steel glinted the moment the blade left its scabbard. Aster's pupils constricted, his eyes shaking under the dazzling light. The sword was strangely forged, unlike any weapon he had ever seen. Is this really a sword? As you can see, it has no blade. A blue aura swirled around the steel while a deep red energy erupted violently. The sword immediately transformed. But when you pour mana into it, the red energy condensed, lengthening and shifting with every pulse of mana. The sword will take shape based on its owner's own mana. Mana exploded from the blade, staining the surrounding ground red. A vortex of air swirled through the forest, sucking leaves and pebbles into its center. High-Fried gripped the sword that was now burning a glowing red. With a stern look, he added, however, if the wielder is not capable enough, the sword will drain their entire mana. It is a blade with a dark reputation. The flaming sword stopped right in front of Aster. He offered, well. Want to try? Without any hesitation, Aster confidently gripped the sword. Flames erupted fiercely behind him, while in his hands, the mana swirled as if answering a call. My mana is pouring into this sword. The mana exploded, a golden light tearing through the air. This feeling is. In the burning reflection, the red mana surged like a living creature. Is my mana flowing into the sword on its own? A red beam of light shot straight up into the sky. Something had officially been released. Their faces went pale. What was that light just now? A meteor falling from the sky? Ah, you idiot, it's the opposite. Something just shot straight up into the air. Amidst the chaos, Alphen just quietly watched them from behind. Something? What do you mean? Without needing to look for long, she had already guessed the source of that light. It must be Aster. He gripped the sword tight, his eyes glowing gold with excitement. This sword is unbelievable. High-Fried's gaze wavered slightly. The thing that's unbelievable here. The sky swirled into a giant vortex, wind and clouds merging into one, is your own power. A power that broke the boundaries of the entire family, and now it existed within him, the one who bore the mark of the 7 wings. Even looking back at the entire history of the Elmheim bloodline, there had never been anyone like him. One day, you will become a swordsman who far surpasses even me. If you master that entire power, one day you will become a swordsman who far surpasses me with these 6 wings, and far surpasses Roderick as well. In his mind, a single thought emerged, I will surpass him. His hand gripped the sword hilt, light flashing across the blade, but power that is too great will always give rise to conflict. From behind his back, a pair of golden wings made of mana burst open brilliantly. If the fact that you possess the 7 wings is exposed, the greater the power, the more risks and enemies you will face, High-Fried warned. There are those who will be envious, those who will harbor resentment, and there will be those who plot to exploit you for their own ends, and there will also be those who want to eliminate you as an obstacle. High-Fried's hand reached out toward him. So that when the time comes, you will not have to regret your own powerlessness. He reached out his hand under the sunlight filtering through the foliage. Become strong starting now, Aster. 2 hands gripped each other firmly. That's right, I will not live a pathetic life like my past one again. Aster raised his head, his eyes filled with determination. Thank you, Father. I will master the 7 wings and this sword. The whole family stood outside the great hall 3 days later. Welcome home. In front of the gate, Kudryavka stepped forward with great momentum. The 2 useless Kudryavkas have returned. She covered her mouth and giggled, her face flashing with mischief as Kudryavka spread her arms wide. With a radiant and enthusiastic smile, wanting to embrace everyone, she said, now, my lovely little sisters. The two girls rushed into her arms, laughter echoing through the hall. Give your beloved sister a warm hug. Both of them bypassed Kudryavka and rushed to hug Martha instead. Welcome home, Sister Martha. Oh dear, Martha said, momentarily stunned. She turned to blame them. Huh? What about hugging Sister Kudryavka? Both girls grimaced as they explained. Because Sister Kudryavka always messes up our hair. She turned away indignantly, avoiding their gaze. No way. Someone who has trained the night spirit to perfection, would never do something so indelicate. Kudryavka saw Alphen standing nearby, so she enthusiastically lunged into her arms. Alphen, have you been a good girl? While hugging her, she quickly ruffled Alphen's hair. Why did you run over here? Martha looked around and noticed someone was missing, then asked, huh? Where's Aster? Highfried spoke hesitantly, as for that boy. The moment she heard his name, her expression changed. A terrifying glow of light emitted from the other side of the forest. Aster was frantically practicing how to control this mysterious sword. His teeth were gritted, sweat pouring off him. Damn it, still not quite there. He focused intently on the mana he had just created, considering it carefully. I can shape the sword with mana, but I can only control it to this extent. Aster kept trying to train, examining the sword closely. He wondered, how can father control it so effortlessly? Suddenly, Kudryavka stepped closer, her voice mocking. Quite a showy display, isn't it? Aster asked in surprise, you're back. Sister Kudryavka, you didn't even bother to show up to greet your sister who just returned. She frowned, her tone teasing. Isn't that a bit too cold? Every word became increasingly harsh. Am I not even worth your concern? Or is it because you think you're special? I heard all about the sword dance festival, even the Night Academy is gossiping about you. Father must be very proud. However, Aster replied calmly, on the other hand, for you, sister, I heard that even though you're still an intern, you've already achieved countless outstanding merits in missions. Kudryavka wore the medal of the Night Academy and was the only one to receive the honorary Knight's medal this year, the Platinum Medal. She said confidently, of course. Otherwise, how could I inherit father's position? Her gaze turned irritable. I heard you refused the right of succession. Aster nervously looked for a way to handle the situation. Is she trying to warn me? Father must have told her, this is really troublesome. It's not like that, he said. She smirked with a sneer. I just think I'm still lacking the ability to take on that position. Every step she took was decisive and powerful. Honestly, both father and you. Kudryavka drew her sword. Know very well what my dream is, and yet it's so cruel. Why, what are you suddenly doing, sister? Aster watched intently, his worry hard to hide. She decisively slashed through a tall tree nearby, sending it flying powerfully toward him. Luckily, he managed to dodge it in time. Aster's eyes showed clear shock. What are you doing all of a sudden? Kudryavka proposed coldly, let's see. It's been a while, let me check your strength a bit. She shouldered the sword confidently. For the next blow, I'm going to be serious. In contrast, Aster hurriedly tried to stop her. Wait, Sister Kudryavka, this sword isn't complete yet. However, she didn't believe him. Can you make the same excuse when facing an enemy on the battlefield? Aster burst out laughing. An enemy? Kudryavka lowered her knees, her eyes full of desire to defeat him. A knight must always consider themselves on a battlefield. If you hold back, I will crush you, understood? He was dazed and worried. This is no joke. Witnessing her lunge at him with the sword in hand, he thought, I'm trying so hard to keep my mana from exploding right now. His eyes were sharp, but there was no other way, otherwise, she would truly. He tried to withstand the force. Otherwise, Kudryavka will kill me. The entire forest was immediately plunged into chaos, the scenery a blur. One could only see Kudryavka constantly advancing with her sword. Your swordplay is as sharp as ever, isn't it? I didn't expect you to keep up with my strikes, especially since I've upgraded them at the Night Academy. She continued speaking. However, what on earth is that half-baked swordplay? Kudryavka swung her sword powerfully, sending Aster staggering back. Your mana control is a total mess. He tried to use his feet to land safely on the ground. Aster couldn't believe it and immediately shouted, "Sister Kudryavka, you're not relenting at all." He suddenly thought of his memories. She's always been like that, just because I'm the only boy in the Viscount's family with inheritance rights. Aster recalled the experiences he had when he was young, and because she is a special existence, possessing a wing emblem superior to anyone else in the clan. He also remembered the time Kudryavka had chased him, a sister like a storm, always looking for excuses to call him unfair and challenge him. But just as Aster was thinking, she suddenly disappeared. To be honest, she is my nemesis. A voice suddenly rang out, startling him. It really is you, Aster. Kudryavka suddenly appeared from high above. She swung her sword with all her might, her forceful voice ringing out, "You are not at all worthy of becoming the next clan head of this family." Over on this side, Martha looked calmly out the window. "Father, is it okay to leave those two like that?" She was worried, watching her father intently. In the worst-case scenario, this siblings' quarrel will end with a corpse, you know. However, Highfried didn't seem worried at all. In their own way, they are great rivals for each other. It's a bit reckless, but it won't lead to such a tragic end. Martha frowned slightly. "I hope you're right, father." Then she slowly approached. "Back to the main point, father, why did you call us back from the Night Academy? Surely it's not just to discuss inheritance." Highfried gently took something out of his desk. "That's exactly right." Martha was truly shocked, unable to believe her eyes. "This is..." The item he took out was a letter, a summons from the Elmheim clan. It seems the elders in power at the main family want to see their nephew with their own eyes. She lowered her eyes and gently stroked her chin in thought. This is quite a serious matter. Highfried looked grave, glancing over slightly. "In the worst-case scenario, he slowly spoke the worst-case plan. Might lose Aster. Over here, Aster was trying to counterattack. Don't talk nonsense anymore. I've already refused the inheritance. You heard it too, didn't you, Kudryavka?" However, Kudryavka didn't hold back at all. "And that's exactly what's making me furious." She decisively swung her sword at Aster. "So heavy," he thought to himself. "It feels like I'm fighting an ox wielding a sledgehammer." His hands suddenly rotated with subtle flexibility. That action made Kudryavka pitch forward. He decisively swung his sword high, simultaneously shouting, "Are you going to listen to what I have to say or not?" Facing those actions, she wasn't worried at all. "You're just running away, aren't you?" Kudryavka swung her sword calmly and decisively, the violent power making him stagger. His back slammed into a tree. What kind of monstrous strength is this? Her blade constantly accumulated mana on its own. Only knowing how to swing a sword is third-rate. Kudryavka calmly passed judgment. Being able to control mana is second-rate. She stood there and continued speaking. Only when you master the way of the magic sword can you be considered first-rate. That gaze could not hide her loathing. "So disappointing, Aster." Kudryavka slowly began to explain. "The difference in wing emblems directly reflects the amount of mana we can contain. They say a one-wing difference means a threefold increase in power." Then she held up two fingers. "In other words, in terms of magical firepower and stamina, my second-rate 5 wings are completely inferior to your 7 wings. Kudryavka's voice, tinged with mockery, rang out. "And yet you avoid a direct confrontation with that cowardly swordplay you prefer to use." She smirked with a mischievous smile. "Can't you trust your own strength to reach the ideal realm of swordsmanship?" Kudryavka suddenly brought up the past. "Or are you afraid you'll lose control again like you did 3 years ago?" At this moment, Aster was stunned to realize, afraid? Me? Afraid of the 7 wings power? He looked at the sword in his hand and thought about everything. I never thought about that. Have I been unconsciously suppressing my own strength? Doubt couldn't help but arise in Aster's heart. Could the reason this sword is so unstable be that I've been forcibly suppressing the mana? However, before he could think further, Kudryavka used her mana again. "Aster, you have everything I've ever wanted." She gripped her sword. "If you just let that luck rot away without even knowing it, then I have the right to be arrogant too." Then she lunged forward without hesitation. "Give it all to me." Aster wouldn't be outdone and began to take a stance. Two powerful streams of mana immediately clashed. Seeing that, she was dazed and couldn't help but shout, "It pushed back my full power strike." Aster spoke slowly and calmly. "Thank you, sister. Thanks to you, I've come to my senses." Seeing him charge, Kudryavka thought to herself, "He's charging without shaping the blade." She was panicked, trying to swing her sword forward. "No way, it's exhausted its mana from that last attack." At this moment, Aster thought to himself, the infinite mana latent within the 7 wings. He silently calculated the next step. "Currently, I can't control it all. But in this moment, it won't maintain a sword shape, it will concentrate all the mana exactly at the point of impact." Kudryavka suddenly smiled. "So you've thought of a way, you idiot." Aster suddenly mumbled something. "This second life I happen to get." A strange mana mark suddenly appeared on his back. "I will absolutely not waste it, and neither will this power." Aster remembered the things that were important to him. Both, the sword and the clan. "No matter how much I achieve, it still feels like I'm empty-handed." Those words left Kudryavka dazed. A second life, a dense stream of mana was being accumulated by him. That's why. Aster decisively aimed straight for her sword. He suddenly disappeared, causing doubt to arise in Kudryavka. "What?" Then she stammered, "The sword disappeared as if it were someone else." Aster whispered softly, "No more holding back." Only now did Kudryavka sense the anomaly. She suddenly startled, her eyes wide in amazement. Kudryavka was stunned, speaking slowly. "Is this my room?" A voice suddenly rang out. "Finally awake, huh?" She immediately said, "Sister Martha. I woke up really late." Kudryavka suddenly sat up. Immediately after, thinking back, she remembered the match with Aster. What on earth happened? However, she cheerfully recounted that Aster was the one who had carried her back there. As she spoke, she pulled the curtains shut and mentioned that he said she had fallen asleep right in the middle of the match, adding that he thought it was likely due to exhaustion from the long journey. She glanced slightly at the sword and thought to herself, "That's not right." Her mind was flooded with racing thoughts, remembering how in that final moment, she truly believed she was being cut down by Aster. She couldn't help but marvel at the events of that time, but in reality, Aster had actually dispelled that mana blade right before the impact. Even Kudryavka herself could feel it, with only the faint remnants of that mana brushing past her body. Thinking back on it, there was simply no way Aster would ever kill his own biological sister. She couldn't suppress the doubt in her heart, yet in that exact moment, she truly believed she was going to be killed. Kudryavka suddenly smiled. He really was an insufferable little brother to the core, even though he was clearly much smaller than her. Then, she abruptly grabbed her sword and asked, "Sister Martha, is Aster heading out to the battlefield again?" Kudryavka aggressively threw off her blanket and declared, "I do not accept that match." She insisted that this time she would use her full strength from the start, but Martha suddenly cut in, "If it's Aster, he's already gone. You know how he is." Those words left her completely stunned as her sister calmly explained there was a summons from the main house specifically for Aster, making her wonder about the incident with their father earlier. "You didn't know?" Martha asked, as a look of total bewilderment appeared on Kudryavka's face. She shouted in a panic, "I never heard anything about that." At that moment, the carriage was racing down the road at high speed. Aster remained composed, staring out the window. Highfried spoke slowly, offering a warning. "The people we are about to meet from now on are the elders who silently assist the Elmheim family like shadows." He continued to explain that they were former heads of the main family and its branches, or high-ranking seniors under the Elmheim banner. These were people who still held massive influence even after retiring from the front lines, the rulers in the dark. Highfried then let out a worried sigh, "Those elders haven't shown a shred of interest since the day I adopted you, yet now they call for you at a time like this." However, Aster only turned his head calmly and remarked, "It's probably because of the incident at the Sword Dance Festival." He quietly recounted what he knew. The old fogies of Elmheim value the family's reputation more than money, honor, or even life itself. Or so I've heard. And those who tarnish that reputation are thrown into a beast's cage to become their prey. As soon as he finished, Highfried looked at his son with concern. "Aster, where on earth did you hear those rumors?" He explained awkwardly that he'd heard them somewhere, adding that he had already prepared himself for execution or exile regardless. His father frowned and watched him intently. "Are you really okay going out there without any escort?" Yet, Aster responded with total calm, "It's fine. I originally planned to leave just as my sisters arrived anyway. He smiled and turned his head slightly, especially with Sister Kudryavka. If the person she hates isn't around, she can finally spread her wings and fly in peace. Aster then gently touched his sword. Thanks to Sister Kudryavka, I've begun to see the way to master this grand. He gripped the sword with a frown. I feel like I can draw out the power of the 7 wings more than before, so no matter what happens to me from now on, please don't save me. Aster added that he was prepared to survive on his own, making Hyfried's brow furrow even deeper. Aster, you. But a voice suddenly rang out, survive on your own. What kind of arrogant act is this youngest brat putting on? Both of them were startled by the sudden voice. He was shocked, unable to believe his eyes as he looked out the carriage window. Kudryavka had suddenly appeared. Sister Kudryavka. Why are you here? She didn't pay the slightest bit of attention to Aster's words. Wait, don't tell me you ran all the way here. Kudryavka calmly climbed inside. Isn't it cruel to leave quietly without saying a word to your big sister? She spoke up petulantly. I heard everything. You were summoned by the great elders of the main house, weren't you? Even Martha and I haven't been summoned once. Hyfried hurriedly cut in. Kudryavka, I think you understand, but taking you to the main house is. She sat down gently next to Aster. I understand. I heard father called us here to watch over things while he was away. I understand perfectly. Kudryavka's sharp eyes flicked sideways, but this summons means things are changing, so we have to be that much more careful. Her voice rang out again. Sister Martha already said it, you know. Aster might not come back. Hearing that, Aster gently tried to comfort her, saying she was exaggerating and he was just going to talk to them, though whether he'd return safely was indeed another matter. But then Kudryavka suddenly pointed a finger straight at his face. Listen here, Aster, I really hate you. A series of sharp accusations followed, because you're a man, because of the 7 wings, and because you're always treated specially. She continued, because you're stronger than me, your own sister, and because you keep acting like an adult even though you're just the little brother, all of it. Aster stared at his sister, his heart full of confusion, but Kudryavka's next words made them both listen closely. But even so, you are still my precious family. No matter how strong you are or how much you act like a grown-up, you're still my little brother. She suddenly stood up, so make sure you come back properly so we can have a rematch. Kudryavka decisively flung open the door. If you quit while you're ahead, I'll never forgive you. Without another word, she suddenly jumped out of the moving carriage. Aster could only watch helplessly. What did she even come here for? Hyfried's eyes lowered as he quietly praised her. She's quite the good rival, isn't she? In his heart, Aster silently thought, but thank you, sister. Watching her figure fade into the distance, his heart surged with determination. I will definitely return. As soon as they arrived, a loud voice rang out, welcome back, Lord Hyfried. The soldier spoke coldly, the great elder is waiting for you inside. Hyfried flatly refused his help. No need for a guide, I know the way. Despite this, the man replied nonchalantly, I'm afraid that won't do, sir. I have orders to personally escort both of you inside. Hyfried watched them closely, thinking to himself that they clearly hadn't called him here out of family affection. At the very least, the atmosphere didn't feel that way. Aster's eyes observed everything quietly, but he glanced at the castle with a touch of nostalgia. It had been a very long time since he was last home. Hyfried suddenly spoke up, I'm sure you already know this, Aster. His voice was deep and calm as he gave a warning, but today, you must absolutely not lose your cool, no matter what they say to you. Aster replied casually, that depends on their attitude. Hyfried squeezed his eyes shut in frustration. That is exactly why I said they are a handful. He continued rambling, listen, the person we are about to meet is. At that moment, Aster's gaze swept across the training grounds. Dallas was nowhere to be seen, with his dominant hand crushed. It's unlikely he'll be back on duty anytime soon. Hyfried's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Are you even listening, Aster? Under his father's gaze, Aster replied awkwardly, yes, of course I am. He asserted firmly, I'll be on my best behavior and stay quiet today. After all, my sister warned me it's best to come back in one piece. The door to the room slowly creaked open, and the escorting soldier immediately reported, Lord Hyfried and his son have arrived. An unfriendly voice suddenly rang out, you've finally arrived. It's been over 10 years, hasn't it? The old man continued, well now, my grandnephew Hyfried. Hyfried immediately knelt respectfully and replied, it has been a long time, sixth family head. The man corrected him, no, it should be great-grandfather. Aster glanced at the man in front of him, so that was the monster lurking in the shadows of the Elmheim family. He thought silently, Zenny's A. Elmheim, the sixth head of the main house. Aster's eyes swept the room, guessing that the others were also high-ranking figures within the Elmheim clan. He looked at each person calmly, recognizing a few faces from the sword dance festival. But a name suddenly flashed in Aster's mind. Is Roderick not here? As if he could see through everything, Zenny spoke up, he's not here, brat. He slowly explained that Roderick was the captain of the knights directly under the royal family. Zenny's leaned on his cane and continued, he doesn't have time to bother with these trivial matters. That's why these old men are helping him handle internal administrative issues. Aster frowned and looked at him. In his past life, he never even had the chance to meet this man, so he hadn't cared. He silently weighed the possibilities, but to gather this many officials without the current head present, for a retired man, he seemed to still hold a vast amount of power. Then, Heifried suddenly asked, and what exactly are these trivial matters? Zenny spoke calmly, I'm sure you've already guessed, haven't you? There was a hint of mockery in his voice. I heard your pet caused quite a stir at the sword dance festival. Anxiety gripped Aster, just as I thought, it's about that. Faced with the questioning, Heifried stood his ground and spoke up for his son. Regarding that matter, the current head, Roderick, should have already settled it himself. However, the elders present began to sneer, that was nothing more than a performance for the public. It doesn't change the fact that the Elmheim name has been tarnished. All those venomous words were immediately directed at him. Adopting a child of unknown origin into the family was a mistake from the start. We could have turned a blind eye if he had remained harmless, but once he dared to show his fangs to the main house, it became a completely different story. There is no choice but to exile him, and of course, you will not escape proper punishment either, Lord Heifried. Standing beside him, Aster couldn't contain himself and immediately shot back, wait, I was the one who did everything. He tried to explain the situation thoroughly, my father had nothing to do with. However, Heifried only shook his head slightly. He signaled for the boy to stop. Aster froze, the words sticking in his throat. Without any mercy, Zenny's continued his criticism. It seems your teaching is quite poor, letting a child interrupt a conversation between adults like that. The old man slowly stood up, we lead over 12,000 knights. Zenny's added, we carry the weight of the Elmheim name on our shoulders. However, the knights are not a unified bloc. At Zenny's words, everyone around them cast contemptuous glances. There are countless people watching from the shadows, waiting for a chance to seize the top position. He continued rambling, naturally, that includes those present in this very room. With that, Zenny slowly approached, we simply want peace of mind. We need proof that you are not someone who will harm the Elmheim family. He coldly raised the hilt of his sword, placing it right in front of Heifried's face. Heifried stared intently, bewildered, this is. Zenny's coldly brought up the past, do you remember? When you failed to protect your master and dragged the honor of the Elmheim family through the mud. He coldly made a proposal, in this very room, you let Roderick cut off one of your arms. With a sharp gaze, he issued a commanding order, this time, prove your loyalty by taking that brat's head. At those words, Aster's eyes filled with shock. Not stopping there, Zenny's continued in a sinister tone, do that, and everything will be forgiven. Despite the pressure, Heifried stood firm, I refuse. He spoke without a hint of fear, I would rather take my own life than raise a hand against my own child. Beside him, the boy looked at his father in confusion. Zenny's replied with irritation, I see. Very well. And then, he aggressively raised his cane, in that case. His voice was steely and devoid of mercy, then you shall die. Your wife, your daughters, and that brat, not a single one will be spared. As soon as he finished, all the soldiers charged forward, as of today, the Viscount's house is officially abolished. In an instant, both Aster and Heifried were tightly surrounded. In that situation, Aster spoke up slowly, what exactly are you afraid of, great-grandfather? The tone of his voice made Zenny's turn his head in anger. What? Aster questioned him coldly, a bunch of grown men huddling together and trembling, how pathetic. If you're so afraid of being bitten by your own dog, then go ahead and exile or discard me as you wish. He then suddenly loosened his tie, but if you so much as lay a finger on my family. The action left Heifried standing there in shock. He quickly ripped his shirt open, sorry, father. I guess in the end, I just can't stay quiet and behave after all. The knights there couldn't help but feel surprised. What is that? That's, they stammered in confusion, looking at Aster's back, that mark on his back. The mark on his back immediately began to glow. If that happens, this 7 wings will become the enemy of the Elmheim family. Aster glanced at them coldly. You all had better think very carefully about this. The surrounding crowd was filled with wonder. No way. Wait, isn't that the 7 wings mark? They still couldn't believe their eyes. Surely it's not a fake. Has that thing really appeared on a human body after hundreds of years? The mark was clearly genuine. Zenitha's voice also held a hint of confusion. Boy, do you understand the weight of what you are showing us? Aster turned back and replied firmly, I understand. Aster's decisive answer made the blue-haired Viscount incredibly excited. He clapped his hands and laughed out loud repeatedly. Seeing everyone turn their attention toward him, he gave a forced laugh. Forgive me, please continue. On this side, Zenith began to explain. First of all, a mark is a mana-producing organ gifted to humans by the spirits in ancient times. By passing that power down from generation to generation, humans have continuously sharpened its strength. Yet until now, no human has ever reached the 7 wings. Except for the spirit clan, the ones who created those marks. Aster immediately questioned him, are you suggesting that I am a member of the spirit clan? He continued, if your 7 wings are real, then it is very possible. A series of unfavorable statements directed at Aster made Highfried feel extremely anxious. Aster spoke up, I am the son of a Viscount. At this point, I no longer care about my origins. All I want to know now is whether you are ready to face me. Even if I am exiled from the Elmheim family, countless noble houses would flock to welcome these 7 wings. To those who always fear rebellion like you, it would be a massive threat. If possible, they would want to keep me as close as possible. A symbol of the 7 wings, one that even surpasses Grand Duke Roderick. This assertion made everyone else in the room jump. Aster thought to himself, as the old man said earlier, even the Elmheim clan isn't a unified bloc. The truth is that a rebellion is about to happen. A large-scale civil war will swallow this entire country. I've seen that future once before. To ensure that I and the Viscount's house survive what's coming, I want to draw a clear line right here. Who is an ally and who is an enemy? Even if it meant taking a few risks. Aster's somewhat arrogant words actually intrigued Zenith. Haha, do you really believe you are that valuable? There is no proof that your 7 wings are real. Aster smiled, his voice sharp, if you don't believe me, then go ahead and kill me. If you do that, it means war between me and all of you. As he spoke, Aster felt a bit of fear in his heart. If the Elmheim family were truly serious, killing someone like him wouldn't take any effort at all. How will they act now? Will they take the bait? Outside, the blue-haired Viscount clapped his hands once more, then stood up to join the conversation. It seems like this conversation is just going in circles. Great Elder, how about we set a challenge for the boy right here? Hearing that, the blonde Viscount gasped, Count Maze, what are you doing? Maze replied, you want to see it too. Don't you? The power of the 7 wings. It's not too late to decide his fate after that. He turned back to the others, what do you all think? This is the territory of the world's greatest martial family. I'm sure there's a suitable challenge or two around here. Aster glanced at him. Assessing Count Maze, was it? No doubt about it. The corners of his mouth curled up. He is an ally. Hearing this, Zenith also agreed slightly, very well. Then follow me. Teaching a grandson who doesn't know how to keep his mouth shut is, after all, a grandfather's duty. They then proceeded to an iron cage, looking down into the deep abyss. Is this the challenge area? It's so dark. He began to explain, behind this darkness is an underground vault connected to the water pipe system. This place was once an emergency shelter. But now I am keeping a magic beast in there. The challenge is simple, just defeat that beast. That's all. Highfried turned to scold him, good grief, you are such a troublesome brat. And after I reminded you so many times to keep the existence of the 7 wings a secret. Aster turned back and smiled, I can't keep something so prominent hidden forever. This is also a good opportunity. He warned worriedly, don't let your guard down, understood? Aster then nodded and jumped down. I'm going. Highfried looked toward Count Maze with somewhat worried eyes. He now wore a look of slight amusement. After a few seconds, Aster landed. It was very damp here and indeed dark, but not so much that he couldn't see anything. Aster's eyes flashed as he saw something. He gasped, "Huh. It's up there." Zenny's reminded him, "I gave him a chance to regain his honor." But he could only cry pathetically until the very end. It was truly unbearable. And this is the explanation for Dallas's absence. Looking at the beast gnawing on Dallas's body, Zenny's continued to warn, "Don't disappoint me, boy." Aster didn't hesitate for a moment. He drew his sword and faced the monster alone. Aster stared at the giant monster standing before him. The moment he saw it clearly, the rumors people had been whispering for so long were finally answered. It was said the Elmheim family secretly kept magic beasts in the mansion. Now, one was standing tall right before his eyes. At that moment, Aster had a sudden thought, "Just this once, I really feel a bit sorry for you, daisies, growing up in this house full of monsters." Suddenly, the monster let out a terrifying roar. The sound shook the entire hall. Its massive body charged straight at Aster with horrifying speed, but Aster didn't retreat a single step. He calmly raised his sword, channeled mana into the blade, and swung. The strike was clean and terrifyingly effortless. The blade sliced straight through the monster's body. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Then, the monster was sliced in half, its two massive halves collapsing heavily onto the floor. The entire hall fell into a deathly silence. Many nobles recoiled a few steps in horror, but Aster remained as nonchalant as if nothing had happened. He casually remarked, "Sister Kudo is much scarier than this thing." Just then, something bizarre happened. From the monster's corpse, a dark, unnatural mist slowly rose. Aster's face immediately hardened. He had miscalculated. This wasn't an ordinary magic beast. This was an immortal monster. Aster's reaction immediately caught his father's attention. With visible concern, he admitted that he had always suspected something extremely dangerous was hidden in the deepest room of the basement. However, the great elder only gave a thin smile. In a calm and intrigued tone, he began to reveal the truth. This monster was naturally attracted to the scent of fresh blood and death, which is why it was locked in the basement. It was the perfect environment for it, as there were countless corpses here. But what was more terrifying was that this undead could not be killed by conventional means. Cutting it, burning it, all were useless. It was intentionally preserved for two purposes: to one day test the power of the sword, and for now, to dispose of bodies. Hearing this, a blonde baron among the nobles frowned. Capturing a living immortal Lin was already extremely difficult, something even veteran knights struggled with. Yet the great elder had actively created one. The great elder's answer was cold: "If the boy dies, it only proves he is a fake. A crest without wings is worth nothing, not even fit to be an ornament." He added an even more venomous remark: "Even if he dies, it's still useful. In fact, things would be even more convenient if he died." As the conversation continued, the count quietly observed Aster. After the boy's confident declarations earlier, he couldn't help but hope Aster wouldn't fall so easily. Meanwhile, the battle continued. Aster constantly clashed with the undead, observing closely as he fought. There was something very wrong with this monster. Every sword strike felt like it had almost no resistance, like cutting through smoke. And its regeneration was horrifying. Wounds healed the instant they appeared. Even for an undead, this level of recovery was abnormal. Aster quickly recalled what was written in the manual about undead: they have no life force. To destroy them completely, there are only two ways: sunlight or holy weapons. If you have neither, it's best to avoid the fight. But Aster had no intention of retreating. If he defeated this monster using conventional methods, his 7 wings title would mean nothing. He would prove his power through sheer force. The moment he made the decision, Aster's power exploded. A terrifying pressure radiated from his body. The surrounding air seemed to detonate. The surrounding walls shattered in an instant. The stone floor cracked, and debris flew everywhere across the hall. The crowd gasped in horror. What kind of mana is this? So this is the power of the 7 wings. What is happening down there? Did the kid defeat it already? Questions rang out one after another. Down below, the cage was engulfed in smoke and dust after the explosion. Then, as the dust gradually cleared, the protagonist appeared without a single wound, not a single wound at all. Seeing this, the great elder clicked his tongue and said, "What a pity." Then suddenly, the monster raised its massive leg. Before Aster could react, its foot stomped heavily onto the ground. The entire earth shook violently. Aster was buried under the monster's massive foot. Aster's father cried out in alarm, but the count immediately stopped him. The monster thought it had won, but under its foot, Aster was smiling. Everything was going exactly as he planned. The monster looked a bit thinner than it had at the start. Aster suddenly surged with power and thrust his sword straight up. The blade sank deep into the monster's chest. Blood spurted from its mouth, pouring down over Aster. In that moment, he knew the process had begun. His strategy was simple: stab it again and again, over and over, until the monster was dead for good. While observing, Aster's father noticed something strange. Aster's rhythm and movements were so familiar. But the more he looked, the more certain he became. This was not a technique he had ever seen before. This was something entirely different. Then suddenly, the entire area began to collapse. The ground shook violently. Massive cracks spread out. Walls fell, and structures crumbled. Everyone panicked. But amidst the chaos, the great elder stood perfectly still. His eyes were locked onto Aster, and in that moment, he finally understood. This wasn't ordinary power. This was the true power of the 7 wings. In just a moment, everything had changed completely. The blonde baron was tossed aside like trash, flying across the hall and hitting the ground hard, unable to even lift his head. What on earth just happened? The blonde baron stammered in a panic, asking where the immortal monster went. Zenith didn't bother to answer. He only had to look down. The truth was all too clear. The immortal undead and the terrifying mana explosion had completely vanished. It wasn't through technique or a special move, but simply through absolute, overwhelming power. At the bottom of the pit, Aster lay motionless, with only faint streaks of energy still swirling around his body. Zenith narrowed his eyes. This wasn't refinement. This was brutal domination, using a terrifying amount of mana and superior quality to force reality to its knees. He turned to Highfried and asked, "Did you do this?" Highfried shook his head, his eyes still fixed on his son. "No. Even I didn't expect the boy to progress this far." Count May stepped forward, his voice full of anticipation. "So, Aster has passed the challenge, then." Zenith walked slowly through the crowd of nobles, his voice calm but decisive. "I have no objections." Maze quickly ran to the edge of the pit and shouted, "Aster passed. Come on up." From down in the pit, Aster's voice rang out, sounding a bit tired. "The chains got caught in the vortex. Toss me a rope, will you?" A while later, in Zenith's private room, the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. Zenith looked at Aster, silent for a long moment before asking, "Are you sure? There won't be a second chance?" Aster replied without a hint of hesitation, "I'm not interested in the inner manor, sir." He calmly explained, if he stayed there, his cousins would never be at peace. Therefore, he chose to remain with the Westwood house. Zenith gave a slight smirk, still pretending to be humble. "Are you?" His gaze sharpened. "But your ambition, I see it clearly in those eyes." The room fell deathly silent. Zenith asked point-blank, "Do you intend to swing your sword against this house, or are you aiming for Roderick?" Aster froze under the terrifying pressure. Zenith leaned back, laughing as he told him to relax. "I didn't mean to pry into your motives." He continued, "The rebels aren't my enemies, because they aren't united. Roderick is now too powerful. If your existence can keep him in check, then I accept it." But Zenith also gave a cold warning, "However, if one day you turn your knife on me, the result will be very clear." Aster nodded silently in acknowledgement. As he stepped outside, he truly understood, Zenith was absolutely not someone to be underestimated. Outside, Highfried immediately ran up to ask what had happened. Aster replied, "I was invited into the inner manor, but I refused." Highfried was in deep shock. Before the atmosphere could grow more tense, Count Mage chimed in with a loud laugh. "A pity, your future in the inner manor would have been much easier." Aster looked at him. "Then why did you help me earlier, uncle?" Mage laughed out loud, "Just testing a gutsy kid, that's all." His voice suddenly turned serious. "From this moment on, you are officially a 7 wings." Having said that, he glanced to the side. The surrounding nobles fell deathly silent, but their minds were filled with greed, fear, and calculation. Some wanted to seize his power, some viewed him as a threat to be eliminated, and others were plotting how to exploit him. Mage placed a hand on Aster's shoulder and said with a smile, "The title of 7 Wings carries immense value, many people will be coming for you." Aster asked in return, "Are you one of them, uncle?" Mage smiled, "I am the Dean of the Knight Academy. Recruiting talent is my job, after all." He glanced around, "Those here have similar intentions. I look forward to the day you enroll." After speaking, he turned and walked away. Aster watched Mage's retreating figure, thinking to himself, "It's still too early to trust this man." High-Fried suggested heading home, saying that Aster's younger sister would likely be very excited to hear the news. Aster gave a faint smile, pointing to his still bandaged wounds. "My mother might actually faint the moment she sees these." Scene shift, a knight kneels before Roderick, reporting, "Young Master Darius has died during Zenitha's trial." Roderick showed no expression, only nodding slightly in acknowledgement. He then asked for more details about High-Fried being summoned and what had occurred. The knight quickly reported everything. After hearing it all, Roderick spoke calmly, "The 7 Wings has returned." The knight was astonished. "You knew beforehand?" "If this continues, the power balance maintained within the family for so long will collapse." "Shouldn't we take action?" he suggested. Roderick smirked, "Just leave it be. If something like this could shake Selma, then Selma would have collapsed a long time ago. There's no need to rush. The 7 Wings will eventually belong to me. Before that, let Aster grow up and see how far he can go." 4 years later. The gates of Terracell Knight Academy, entrance exam day. Candidates are crowding the entrance. There are whispers as some people recognize Aster. Everyone is surprised because he is now fully grown, standing there with complete calm and confidence. A young man steps forward, placing documents on the desk. The content clearly states, "The state and the Knight Order will not be held responsible for any casualties during the exam." After signing, candidates must present their wing emblem. The instructor asks, "Name?" Aster replies gently, "Aster of the Elmheim House." The instructor pauses for a second, then snaps his head up. Aster, now a grown man, smiles very slightly, his voice a bit lazy. "My wing emblem is a bit difficult to display. Would showing my face be enough instead?" Aster enters the examination hall. Right then, a man calls his name loudly, drawing everyone's attention. He points at Aster, his voice full of contempt. "You look strange. I've never seen your face before. You must come from some mediocre town. This place is not for an outsider like you. This hall is filled with the most elite nobles, true paragons, all gathered for the prestigious selection exam to become Knights of the Kingdom." Aster remains composed, replying clearly, "This is exactly where I belong." Hearing this, Vigor startles, but his surprise quickly turns to irritation. He continues, "Everyone here has undergone rigorous and grueling training. Even so, they persevere, pursuing the dream of walking the path of glory among the elite by retaking the test over and over." He scoffs, pointing at the small sword hanging at Aster's hip. "A total novice carrying such a tiny sword dares to stand here. This is not a playground for a green swordsman like you. If you're just here to sightsee, then go home." Those around began to whisper. "It's Vigor again, he bullies the rookies every year, doesn't he?" Amidst the whispering, all eyes shift to Aster. They realize the target might not be ordinary. "Isn't that the Elmheim family member from the rumors?" They're whispering. "Aster of the 7 Wings." That name makes the atmosphere immediately more tense than ever. Vigor repeats in shock, "The 7 Wings." At this moment, someone approaches from behind, recognizing Aster and appearing surprised. "I finally know who you are." The newcomer is Gurion. He gives a devious smile and says, "Long time no see, cousin. Since no one knows where or when you were born, I'll take the liberty of calling you cousin." Aster replies, "Regarding Darius, I am very sorry." Gurion shrugs, appearing indifferent, "No, you don't need to concern yourself. A man who shames the family deserves to die. Now that he's gone, I actually feel relieved. Even though he was only a year older than me, he was always bossy and condescending. So to me, he was just a nuisance. Whether the title of 7 Wings is real or fake, you'd better not underestimate the members of the main family, because there's no one left here to protect you." After hearing Gurion's words, the crowd begins to gossip. 2 people from Elmheim are participating this year. That truly is bad luck. There's still a fierce conflict between the main house and the branch house, and no one wants to get involved in that dangerous business. Realizing Aster is from Elmheim, Vigor becomes anxious. "You, you're really a member of the Elmheim family. Aster smiles, reaching out to introduce himself in a calm and humble manner. A pleasure to meet you. Please, just call me Aster. Scene shift to the first exam location. The atmosphere becomes tense and expectant. From the highest position, Hoster speaks loudly to the candidates. You have made it this far, I commend your courage and your patriotism. Hoster emphasizes, the Royal Knights of Freezer are not like provincial knights from the countryside. We serve the king directly, protect the king, and are a glorious sword ready to sacrifice our lives for him. Therefore, there is no place for a useless sword here. Demonstrate your true worth. Treat today's exam like a battlefield. Hearing this, Aster smiles faintly, those sweat beads on his face. He thinks to himself, his words sound ridiculous, but I can't deny their meaning. I've finally returned to this place. The path to becoming a royal knight, the path that was once denied to me when I was wingless. Ahead is a world of power that was once completely beyond my reach. At the peak of that world reigns a single man, the commander-in-chief of the Royal Knights, Roderick. With burning determination, Aster silently vows, just wait, Roderick. I will catch up to you in no time. But first, I must pass this selection exam. Hoster's voice echoes with authority, it is time to begin. He declares without hesitation, the first exam, the challenge of the Arrow Tower. The moment the words are spoken, the atmosphere shifts violently. From invisible directions, arrows fly like rain. They strike candidates with ruthless precision. One person is hit directly in the eye, collapsing instantly. The suddenness and brutality of the attack shock the crowd. Aster stands frozen, witnessing the horrific scene before him. Hoster continues calmly, the last person standing will be the winner. Many are hit immediately and fall. Panic spreads like wildfire. The remaining candidates begin to scatter out of survival instinct. Amidst the chaos, desperate cries ring out. What are we supposed to do now? Run. Staying still is certain death. A few try to organize, everyone group up, cover each other, and block the central arrows. From above, Hoster observes calmly, just as he predicted. Those retaking the exam from last year already know how to react. But even so, the survival rate is only about 30%. These measures are only superficial and will soon reach their limit. What I want to see is superior problem-solving ability, something only those with a wing emblem can achieve. In the middle of the turmoil, Aster stands perfectly still. He neither runs nor defends immediately. As arrows tear through the battlefield around them, Vigor sees this and is both annoyed and confused. What is that idiot doing standing still? Did he faint from fear? Durian stands not far away, smirking, how weak. Just stand there and die like a porcupine. Suddenly, Aster moves. With clear intent, he draws his sword. A brilliant red aura erupts from his body, exuding terrifying power and authority. Every arrow flying toward him is easily deflected. The sight astonishes everyone, those witnessing it can hardly believe their eyes. Did he just knock back every single arrow? A faint smile appears on Aster's lips. Confidence replaces his initial stillness. Go ahead and fire everything you have at me. Aster stands alone amidst the endless rain of arrows rushing toward him, but not a single one manages to touch him. Vigor, witnessing that terrifying scene, is completely shaken. Shock and horror choke him. He stares at Aster, his mouth stammering incoherently. Monster? What kind of monster is he? Realizing that not a single arrow could pierce through, the examiner observing from afar takes it all in. He is visibly astonished, but unlike Vigor, his reaction carries interest and delight. He carefully analyzes Aster's power and concludes that he is spinning his released mana to create a powerful air current. The precision and control behind this technique are truly impressive. He seems to have enveloped himself in a raging storm. Gradually, the violent red energy storm begins to subside. The surrounding candidates watch in fear mixed with amazement. Has it stopped? Is it over? As the dust settles, the examiner notes the situation. Many candidates who should have died have strangely survived. This result leaves him impressed by the overwhelming aura. He remarks that the number of survivors is higher than expected, but it doesn't matter. He commends their courage and asks them to look around at the bodies lying scattered about. Those who are still standing have officially passed the first exam. Without giving them time to rest, he immediately orders, follow me to the next exam location. Among them, Vigor gasps for breath, still trembling. He laments, "Oh, what a cruel examiner. Even though we just endured a continuous rain of arrows." In contrast, Aster remains composed, a faint smile on his lips as he looks at Vigor. "Are you tired already?" Aster's calm, almost indifferent attitude irritates Vigor further. "Why are you so calm? What the hell did we just go through?" From above, the examiner continues to watch Aster intently. He studies him with interest. He released a massive amount of mana and shows no sign of fatigue, so this is Aster of the Seven Wings. With growing expectation, he wants to see more, especially the style of combat Aster will display in the next stage. In the crowd, Gurian's eyes remain fixed on Aster. His face stiffens as memories flood back. He recalls his mother's words before this exam, "You must stop Aster at all costs. It's a matter concerning the future of the Elmheim family." The weight of responsibility presses down on him. As Gurian thinks, tension rises in his heart. A while later, the next stage of the exam arrives. The examiner stands before all the candidates and announces a new rule to ensure balance: everyone will use identical swords. Exchange your current weapons before the orientation begins. Vigor hears this and gets annoyed. Why is there such a bothersome rule? Aster asks calmly, was it different in previous exams? Vigor explains, for mid-tier nobles like us, the swords used are usually the same, so it makes little difference. But I suspect the real reason for this rule concerns you. He implies that Aster's special sword is being viewed with caution due to its uniqueness or potential danger. Aster listens to every detail, showing little emotion. At this point, Gurian approaches from behind with a calm but mocking tone, "Cousin, have you already tamed a follower?" Vigor immediately gets angry and shouts, "Who's a subordinate?" Gurian only smiles, maintaining his composure. "If I remember correctly, you're the heir of Baron Smythe's family, right?" Then, with a slight but sharp smile, he leans in and whispers a threatening remark, "A third-rate noble from the countryside like you dares to stand on the side opposing me? If so, you will have to face severe consequences." Having said that, Gurian turns and leaves, leaving behind a heavy, tense atmosphere. Vigor is shaken. His initial confidence has vanished completely, replaced by fear. Young Master Gurian, I have no connection with him at all. Observing the exchange, Aster couldn't help but let out a forced smile. He thought to himself, the situation has become quite awkward. The atmosphere around them had clearly shifted, becoming much more tense and uneasy. All the candidates moved to the next testing location. The examiner began explaining the rules for the second stage. The first test was about sentinel combat. This time, you will be divided into 3 teams and compete to occupy enemy barracks in the forest. Aster and the other students listened intently. The examiner continued, raising your team's flag onto the podium within a barracks will count as an occupation. Whichever team occupies 2 or more barracks by the time the afternoon bell rings will be the winner. It is also important to note that you are not allowed to destroy or steal the flags. However, other than that, no actions are forbidden. The swords issued to you essentially allow you to cut down your opponents. Immediately following this, the examiner announced the team assignments. Gurian's team received the red flag, another student's team received the yellow flag, and Aster's team received the blue flag. As the exam began, Aster saw a smoke signal rise into the sky. He quickly alerted his teammates. The smoke signal marks the start of the test. Each barracks has 3 flags, and to win, we must occupy 2 or more, including our own. Vigor gradually grasped the situation. Only one of the 3 teams can pass this exam. Aster nodded in confirmation, but he could sense the anxiety coming from his teammates. The others, already uneasy, pointed out, "Does this mean we have to fight the Elmheim house? That's going to be a bit difficult." Aster felt a sense of awkwardness upon hearing that. Vigor, clearly frightened, explained, "Don't you understand? We are afraid of retaliation from the Elmheim family. Our opponent is the young master of the main house. Even if it's just an exam, swinging a sword at him could ruin our futures. In the worst-case scenario, we might never dare to call ourselves knights again. Even our families and retainers could be slaughtered. No one wants to become an enemy of such a powerful family. So, do you all intend to give up on this competition? Is it worth continuing the exam? There will be other exams in the future. Better that than gambling our entire lives. Vigor gave a hollow laugh. You probably wouldn't understand the feelings of weaklings like us. Aster ran forward quickly. He never expected to end up isolated in a team battle like this. At the same time, he understood their fear. Tonight's, the Elmheim house was an autocratic family that could not be opposed, and Gurion was the symbol of that terrifying dominance. As Aster recalled Vigor's words about not understanding the weak, he reflected on his own position. From an outsider's perspective, he was still viewed as a part of that family. Even so, he noticed everything around him was too quiet. No battles had started yet, making him wonder if everyone was being cautious or if something else was happening. As he entered the testing area, he was taken aback. The captain of the yellow flag team was already there. He stood with his flag, appearing as though Aster's solitary arrival had been predicted. "Oh, I didn't think you'd dare to come here alone like that." Everything was unfolding exactly as he had said. Aster was confused, especially when he realized his opponent had already lowered his own base's flag. "Who is he?" The blonde student spoke nonchalantly. "It just so happens that I have a bit of free time as well." He then tossed his flag into the air and stated clearly, "I want you to stay and keep me company for a bit." Aster was astonished, not understanding the meaning behind this action. The blonde student drew his sword, signaling the start of the confrontation. What on earth is the meaning of this? At the same time, in another part of the forest, a formidable alliance had formed. Gurion's red flag team and the yellow flag team had joined forces with the common goal of defeating Aster. Gurion smiled confidently. "I'll show you, cousin, how the Elmheim house truly fights." The second test of the kingdom's knight selection exam, it was a battle of offense and defense. As soon as the announcement ended, the battle officially began. The 20 candidates were divided into 3 teams. The rules were explained clearly. The team that captures 2 or more bases by the end of the exam will be the winner. In other words, the goal to pass the exam was to plant one's team flag on an enemy base in the midst of the skirmish. Aster stepped forward and asked directly, "You're definitely the yellow team. So why are you hanging a red flag like that?" The blonde youth replied calmly, "The reason is simple, because an alliance has been formed between Elmheim and myself." After speaking, he began to release aura from his sword. The surrounding air immediately became tense and heavy. The referee appeared and clarified this person's identity. He was the eldest son of the Nolan family, a family famous as the founders of royal swordsmanship. His name was Christopher Nolan. He was a wielder of the 5-wing crest. The referee continued, "In the first test, he was overshadowed by the 7-winged genius and didn't stand out much. But in the Arrow Tower test, only 2 people passed through without a change in expression, the 7-winged Aster and the 5-winged Christopher Nolan. Both are exceptional talents, possessing terrifying potential. It is a pity that 2 such talented individuals must face each other in this situation." On this side, having heard that, Aster immediately asked, "This is an alliance with Elmheim, isn't it? Do you really understand what you are doing? Even if you do this, in the end, only one team can win." Christopher listened and calmly blocked Aster's attack. "I understand perfectly. And because Elmheim is standing on our side, I have decided that the main family will be the winning team." He continued to explain, "Perhaps at this very moment, my teammates are heading toward your base along with Elmheim to attack." Hearing those words, Aster suddenly felt a surge of danger, thinking to himself that the situation was bad. Smith and the others were in serious danger. He continued to face Christopher and asked, "Gurion threatened you, didn't he? He said something about what would happen if you dared to oppose Elmheim." Christopher advanced without hesitation. No one intentionally stands in front of a charging carriage when they know they will be crushed. We knight nobles exist in a strict class society, such actions are only natural. As he spoke, he unleashed a powerful attack filled with overwhelming force, while declaring, "This is also the natural way a noble should behave." Aster tried to block the strike, but even while defending, he felt the pressure spiraling out of control. In the very next moment, his sword suddenly snapped in 2. Looking at the broken sword, Aster realized something was wrong and thought, "There is definitely something wrong with this sword. Did that examiner earlier intentionally give me a defective item?" Suspicion lingered in his mind as he tried to grasp what had just happened. But Christopher did not stop. He continued to push forward with powerful force and confidently declared, "There is no need to worry, because from start to finish, our battle is merely a duel of honor between 2 nobles. I've never liked the people of Elmheim, especially show-offs like you. Christopher had ruthlessly smashed Aster's sword and continued to attack relentlessly, giving him no room to breathe. Aster was pushed into a defensive position amidst overwhelming odds, but in the next instant, he quickly regained his composure. He grabbed the broken shard of the sword, channeled energy into it, and suddenly unleashed a powerful forward strike. Christopher easily raised his sword to block it. In that moment of opening, he suddenly discovered Aster had turned and fled. Christopher shouted in surprise, "Are you actually running away?" "Wait." Aster did not stop, turning his head as he ran to say, "Our fight will have to wait. Right now, I have someone else I need to handle first." Christopher sneered and mocked, "Turns out you're scared. You don't even deserve to be called a knight." Afterward, Christopher picked up the broken sword from the ground to examine it closely and wonder, what kind of sword is this? Even for a cheap sword, the quality is far too poor. He realized something was fishy, paused for a moment, ran a hand through his hair and whispered, "I see. This is Elmheim's doing. They dared to play dirty to ruin the fun." Meanwhile, on the other side, Aster ran back to his territory and immediately shouted, "Smith, are you okay?" Before receiving an answer, a familiar voice rang out, "You're here earlier than I expected, cousin." The person standing there was Gurion, the one behind the entire plan. Gurion continued, "He talked big about how one person was enough, which made me look forward to it a bit. How are things on your end? We just captured the third base over here, didn't we? For now, we could call this absolute dominance." But before he could finish his sentence, Aster cut him off. "Gurion, what have you done to my teammates?" His question made him a bit annoyed. "Oh, that." From behind, a sword was pointed at Aster's back. His own teammates were pointing their swords with hostility and saying, "Don't blame me. Didn't I tell you from the start I wouldn't follow you? I'm not going to join a fool who opposes Elmheim." Gurion laughed triumphantly. "Ha ha ha, those guys didn't even bother to resist one bit. Even if they are country monkeys, they still have enough brains to understand whose side to be on." Aster replied calmly, "Do you really think just gathering numbers is enough to beat me?" Gurion waved his hand and laughed, "No, not at all. You're dead wrong, little brother. I've already won. The winning condition for this offense-defense battle is to hold 2 or more bases when the exam ends. Even if you run yourself to death trying to plant flags at other bases right now, you won't have enough people left to guard those flags. We just have to wait for you to leave for another base and then leisurely replace it with a red flag. We need at least 2 bases. As long as we hold that, we win." Aster gripped his sword and threatened, "In that case, I'll make it impossible for you to carry out that plan by cutting all of you down right here." The faces of the surrounding soldiers immediately turned pale, but Gurion laughed victoriously. "That's just a bluff. That sword is useless now, isn't it? Even if you have the 7 wings, without a weapon, you're like a bird that's lost its wings. Or do you plan on fighting all of us here alone?" Aster still smiled, drawing his sword with total confidence. "Impressive." He tossed the sword behind him and continued, "You've calculated everything much more carefully than I thought." Seeing this, Gurion laughed victoriously, "I've definitely won." But contrary to his assumption, the moment the sword hit the ground, Aster's eyes narrowed, preparing to act.